Most people think that the central banks are independent agencies and they're working hard on our behalf to keep prices stable, to keep employment up, and to keep the markets up. Aren't they so lovely? But what if I told you that my real job is based on your hopium, that I'm really doing things for your benefit? My real job is to regulate the rate and speed of inflation so that you don't get out of our money game. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has publicly emphasized that the Fed must reestablish its credibility as an independent institution, focus solely on its legal mandate, stable prices, maximum employment, and moderate long-term interest rates. Wow, but how has that changed over time? Because in the same breath, the administration is actively reshaping the Fed's leadership, firing governors, installing allies, and pushing for immediate rate cuts. If successful, the president would have a majority on the 7-member board of governors, effectively giving him control over interest rate decisions and bank supervision. Let's face it, that's not just influence, it's command. The Fed must change course. Well, this is the central thesis of Bessent's critique. It signals a direct challenge to the Fed's current trajectory and sets the tone for sweeping reform. Now look, we've got to take a look at some of the key themes in this piece, this op-ed that Bessent did for the Wall Street Journal. He's looking at mission creep. The Fed's role has expanded from stabilizing currency. I got to tell you, as a student of currencies since 1987, some of this does not make any sense to me because I know that it's really just garbage. But I'm going to talk to you about this op-ed piece because I thought it was really interesting. So, number one, let's go back to mission creep. The Fed's role has expanded from stabilizing the currency to managing asset markets, stock markets, bond markets, and fiscal rescue. So they create the problems that they ride in and they fix them. Political pressure from Nixon to today, well, guess what? The presidents have always sought to influence the rate decisions of the Federal Reserve, particularly around election time. But now what do they have is a credibility crisis. Because as Larry Summers, the past Treasury Secretary, warned, we are now on the foothills of a credibility crisis with inflation expectations at risk. So I want to talk about that for just a minute because it is not what is true that matters to them. It is what is believed to be true. And that's why you see them constantly looking at those inflation expectations and sentiment, consumer sentiment, because that's how they manage, is by nudging you in a direction. But history shows the erosion of Federal Reserve independence and how much the erosion has cost us, the public. I'd love it if you could understand what's truly happening because it'll give you insight into what comes next. And knowing this could easily enable you to make educated choices that puts your best interest first. I mean, really, what a concept. But let me show you what I'm talking about. Using my favorite chart, the Fed's purchasing power chart, because I can tell you everything on here. This timeline shows why sound money matters, why physical gold, physical silver that is above the central bank's influence, why that really matters. Because when central banks lose that independence, inflation and instability follow. when the public loses confidence in the Fed, they lose confidence in the money, like has happened so many times before. But gold and silver, they don't bend to politics. They anchor value, purchasing power value when institutions drift. Look at this, 1913, the birth of the Fed. The thermostat is installed. So imagine the economy as a giant house. In 1913, Congress installed a thermostat, the Federal Reserve, and that's to keep the temperature just right, or the rate of inflation. That's the truth. Not too hot with inflation. They don't want it going too fast because people notice. Not too cold with recession. But even then, the Treasury Secretary had a seat at the table. So frankly, from day one, the thermostat wasn't fully independent. So look at this. During World War I, the Fed didn't just regulate temperature, it started pumping heat. It became a furnace for war financing, lending at discounted rates to support those Liberty loans. The thermostat was no longer adjusting, it was fueling. And then, of course, what did we get? We got the roaring 20s. But that heat, that fuel, it expanded the stock market, didn't it? And the real estate market and the oil market. Doesn't that sound familiar? So there we go. Between 1933 and 1951, well, that was the period of the New Deal and World War II. And the thermostat gets bolted to the wall. Presidents and Congress used it to finance massive programs, and the thermostat was locked in place, yet set too high, and the House overheated with debt and inflation. So much so that by 1971, President Nixon was kind of forced, I don't justify any of this, frankly, but kind of forced to end gold convertibility. Gold was like a mirror reflecting the true value of money. And look at it, was going down. But President Nixon removed that mirror. Now you couldn't see anything. Now the Fed could print money without gold backing. And with elections looming, that thermostat was secretly turned up to boost the economy. And it provided the inflation that President Nixon was purporting to fight. That led to stagflation, high prices, slow growth. That's where we are right now. The House got muggy and really uncomfortable. All right, but it did create the greedy 80s, all of that new money into this new system. And by 2008, and all of the risk that was put in there after the financial crisis, what'd the Fed do? Whoa, they added new buttons, wires, and settings. They created all sorts of new tools. It wasn't just a thermostat anymore. It was a big, fat lab experiment. And it started buying assets, setting market prices, backstopping Wall Street. The Fed became the only game in town. And the House, well, it was redesigned to serve asset owners first as they were installing the next monetary system with more control to the government. And let's jump to 2020 and 2023 and the pandemic response. During COVID, the Fed's experiment spilled into every room. It supported corporate debt, flooded markets with cheap money, and blurred the line between monetary and fiscal policy. And it created a zombie economy from the top down. The thermostat was now controlling the plumbing, the lighting, and the locks. Independence? Could you really see it? It was barely recognizable. So let's just look at where we are today, because now the administration is replacing key parts of the Fed's leadership. If enough allies are installed, the president could control the dial directly, setting interest rates, approving regional presidents, and influencing bank supervision. And we know that we're all about risk, baby, risk. It is actually like handing the thermostat to one person and saying, set it however you want. Because when that thermostat becomes a tug of war rope, the house suffers. Inflation can and will spike. Savings lose value because the currency loses value. And trust in the system, it's fading, and high inflation makes it fade even faster. As Larry Summers warned, and you guys know he's not my favorite person, but we are on the foothills of a credibility crisis, because in every Ponzi scheme, you gotta have that credibility and new money. And if people stop believing the Fed can keep prices stable, the whole house starts to shake. But at Zang Enterprises, we don't wait for someone else to fix the thermostat. We build our own with a sound money foundation, because it's anchored in physical gold and silver, but also food, water, energy, security, community, barterability, wealth preservation. Sound money doesn't change with politics. Local resilience doesn't depend on central banks and governments. And when you combine both, you're not just adjusting, you're designing. And in a classic flight to safety, well, look at this. Gold mining stocks have surged to their first new peak since 2011. When investors rushed into safe haven assets during Europe's debt crisis and the U.S. credit downgrade. But this time, global instability and political pressure on the Federal Reserve and all central banks have reignited gold's rise. And as uncertainty grows over interest rate policy and leadership shakeups, miners like Newmont, Barrick, and Wheaton have scored more than 80% just this year. That is a signal that trust in fiat is fading, and fading fast. But what do desperate governments do during these periods of time as well? They add royalties, meaning that is a form of confiscation. They take more and more from the miners. And if there was an overt confiscation, you would see those stocks start to fade as well. So the next time someone says the Fed is independent, ask who's holding the rope. Because quite frankly, when the thermostat becomes a political tool, the temperature stops serving the people and it starts serving those that are in power, like it has since 1913. But with sound money and strong community, you don't just survive the heat, you thrive in your own climate. And if we can come together on a global basis and vote with our wallets, converting this garbage fiat into sound money, we can control the thermostat, because we will have taken our power back. Citizens for Sound Money, locally and globally, that's how we can do it. Let's come together, because I 100% know that together we can make a positive difference in this world. And until next we meet, please be safe out there. Bye-bye.